My name is John, and I am an alcoholic. I was born in Greene County, Ohio in 1966. Lived there most of my adult life, up until about the last 3 years. Growing up as a child, we were country, farm, started feeling lonely pretty young. Didn't have a lot of peers close, we had neighbors, a couple of boys here and there, were girlfriends, but there was just not a lot of people around. As I came on up through school, say junior high, then your area kind of grew from one little local school to two or three in smaller towns close by. My parents were not alcoholics. They were somewhat weekend drinkers when I was young. I'm the youngest of 10, so my older siblings by then were out and married. They would make margaritas or things on the weekend. Grandpa would come over. They would play nickel-dime poker. At about the age of 9, they would come over to play poker, and my grandpa was what I know now would be the town drunk. He would say, "Hey, little John," or John David. He always used my first and middle name. Go get me a beer. We'd hand me a Stroh's can, and there'd be yay much in the bottom. And I would go off to the kitchen and sneak a sip or two and throw it away and get him another one and go back. Didn't happen a lot, but normally 3 or 4 times during a poker game. My taste for it wasn't there at all. I thought it was horrible, but it sounded big. It sounded grown up. Only once or twice can I remember much effect from it, and most of that was sick. Maybe because I'd just eaten or overeaten, or even candy as a child, maybe the mix just didn't. As I got a little older, into my teenage years, met more friends, and we were kind of hanging out more, and I was allowed to venture further from home, even if it was just on a bicycle. We would meet up, campouts and things, and buddies and friends, and I always knew where to get alcohol. Farmers around me, some of the old farmers, they had refrigerators in their barns. There was always beer there, always, and I knew it. So I'd get in there and sneak some to our little campouts and things, and it wasn't really so much I wanted it. It was that they kind of did. And I'm assuming for the same reason that it made us feel grown. Or maybe even the little bit of bad boy outlaw kind of thing, maybe that. Yeah, this went on through most of my teenage years. My junior year in high school, I went from the Jamestown, our local little high school, to the Greene County Career Center. Well, that opened my social world up from just 2 or 3 small towns around to the whole county. And that changed the whole game. I met people from a lot different backgrounds. My family didn't have a lot of money, but we were rich because we were tight. We were a really close family. We had love. But we didn't have much money. But I would meet kids from all different backgrounds, rich kids, poor kids, middle income. And females by then, I was gaining interest. I hadn't had much interest till then. I'd had little girlfriends first, puppy loves, things like that. I didn't have a concept for love. Probably because I didn't love myself. Like I say, junior year, it was about halfway through, I met the woman that would become my wife at Greene County Career Center. We were instant attraction. Just instantly. I spoke to her in the hallway. Within 2 or 3 days, we were dating. Well, I didn't have a vehicle at the time, but my buddies sure would help me out to help me get around. By then, even on our first date, our first real car date, I brought alcohol. We had talked about it, and she mentioned, she liked Miller High Life. So I grabbed a 12-pack and brought with me. That night, I probably drank 4 or 5. I was just starting to really like the effects of alcohol. She drank part of one just because, I think, just because I did. Life progressed on into my 20s. I started working a pretty secure job I'd had. I was a publisher printer, web press printing. Started having kids in my early 20s. By the time I was 25, we had our third child. And my alcoholism turned from the beginning stages to entitlement. I work hard, so I deserve this. I take care of my family, so I deserve this. That alcoholic attitude went on for a little while. And then by my early 30s, I was to the selfish stage. I earned this, so the kids are fed, the lights are on, I can go hang out with my buddies. Not really even caring at the time how that was affecting my children or my wife. The kids started in school in sports and band and things, and Dad wasn't there. I was always sick or had to work or drunk, and they didn't want to be embarrassed. At that time, I wouldn't have said that. I wouldn't have admitted it. I would have found something to blame that on. Yeah. I always had faith in God, but I didn't have respect for God. I spent many years blaming God for my problems, my troubles, my woes. I always knew God was there, but it was kind of like he was right here. If I needed him, I'd just holler. Never showing any faith or respect. Grew up in a Christian household, but it was kind of mechanical. Sunday morning, Wednesday night, prayers every day. God bless Mommy, God bless Daddy, Grandma, Grandpa, Bubby, Sissy, Fluffy, Spot. That was it. And I kind of raised my kids the same way for many years. Stayed married 17 years, was with her over 20 years. I'm going to fast forward a little bit to about 2003. I found out some things that happened early in our relationship, and I couldn't be married to her. I couldn't stay married because I was brought up traditional values that the vows were the vows and they were meant to be kept. I'm the lucky person that my parents were married 50 years when my mom passed, and they stayed married all that time, so it wasn't in my credo to be divorced. But I found out some infidelity, so we divorced. And this divorce, I'll explain how it went. When we divorced, I still lived in the same house. We got up on a Friday morning, we had breakfast. We got in the same car, went to the courthouse, signed paperwork, got a divorce, had lunch, went back home. But that changed things for us. The respect came back. The empathy for each other, the true feelings came back. They did. I wasn't a good husband, I wasn't a good father, and I was surely not a good friend. I didn't know how. The only thing I knew was that alcohol eased the feelings, and I didn't have to look at it. Well, after 2003, in spring of 2005, my wife and I I still called her my wife. We weren't married. My mate and I decided to have one more child. We had 3 older children. To have one more child before we got too old. We had talked about this all of our lives, to have a big family. Well, spring of 2005, we did it. None of our children were accidents, but none were prevented. Never used any protection, never, no. If it's God's will, that's what we'll do. And that's the way we were. She became pregnant in the spring, carried just fine through the summer of 2005. November 29th was a Tuesday. She delivered my youngest boy, Jacob, which he'll be 18 this year. That was on a Tuesday. No complications, no, normal. She had gestational diabetes with all of our children, but was never medicated. They just watched it. She brought home my son on Thursday. They had her stay an extra day. And she kind of laid around. I get it, delivery. I mean, wow. Stayed around home till Friday afternoon. She was a Fairborn school bus driver. Friday afternoon, she decided that she was going to take the new baby when the bus drivers came in for the evening in the afternoon to show them the new baby. I'm kind of going around about my story a little bit, but I'll get there. While she was at the bus barn showing the drivers the new baby, she dropped dead. No pre-existing conditions, illnesses, or anything. And the reason I'm relating this way is the alcoholic part of the story. I was in utter shock. I had other children, but like I said, when I was younger, I felt entitled. I would change a diaper, but I didn't change a lot of them. I did feedings, but I didn't do a lot of them. Now here all of a sudden I've got a newborn, and I'm by myself. I was not alone, but I was by myself. Utter shock. Well, I managed to quit drinking for about a year and a half on the white knuckle plan. I can't drink. I got things I got to do. People kept asking me, what are you going to do with the baby? Like I was just going to give him away or something. I'm like, I'm going to raise a son. What do you think I'm going to do? This went on well for about a year and a half till my son got up walking, talking. Grandma started being able, her mother's a little older, started being able to watch him. She would take him in the evening so I could work overtime, occasional weekend. Well, it turns out that the weekends and the evenings came more often and often. I was drinking. Progressing as far as illness, that one more to take off the sick got shorter and shorter. I got to the point of where it was nonstop. If I stopped for an hour, I was violently ill. Wound up losing custody of my youngest son, and they asked me to leave. I was homeless for a short time, couch surfed for a while, and a man I had known for a while, had a house here in Dayton, asked me to just move in, help bring up the property a little bit, keep maintenance. That's all I had to do. Okay. Everything provided, no bills. So I did that for a while. But him and I didn't have the best relationship, and I wasn't happy, so the drinking kept progressing. Finally, I'd done some repairs over about a 6-month period, and I told him, I said, hey, man, I need a few dollars. I hadn't asked him. He gave me $150, and I went on an alcohol bender of about 3 weeks. Every day, every minute, if I was awake, I was drinking. Drink myself to sleep, do it again. All the while, I didn't go back home. I went to friends' houses and I slept out. This is July, late June, July of 2021. Finally, I ran out of money. Ran out of places to go. Friends were washed up with me. I knew I had to do something. Well, I went to another buddy's house, and I was physically sick as I could be. And he said, Man, I got a bottle in my freezer. You can have it. I've had it for a while. You can have it if it'll keep you from being sick. Well, he gave it to me. And it was Everclear, which is pure grain alcohol. I drank some of it, and it did relieve this physically sick. But that was still short-lived. Within a day or two, that was gone, and I knew that I had to do something. I was going to try to tough it out and water in the sickness and just dry myself out. The second day, I had a feeling I've never had before. I couldn't stabilize myself. My mind was bouncing around, and I haven't experienced that ever in my life. Physically, I felt like when I'd be sitting here that I was just hovering. I was afraid I was going to die. And I was in Fairborn at that time at a buddy's house. I had ridden a bicycle into Fairborn. And I tried to tough it out that evening. By about 5 o'clock that following morning, I knew I couldn't do it. I was afraid I was going to have a heart attack or die. Well, I was going to do what I'd done a few times before during my alcoholic career. Call the paramedics, go to the hospital, get some oxygen and IV. A couple hours, I'm good to go. And I can't honestly tell you, I didn't have a burning bush moment. Something just changed. The paramedics showed up, and I had to wheelbarrow it out to the sidewalk about 50 yards out of this apartment complex to the main road so they could find me. They showed up, and the paramedic says, "We're not taking you. You're just drunk sick. We're not taking you." And they left. I'm like, wow, they're going to leave me here to die. I got to do something. Well, I got up, and I used trees and the neighbors' railings and things and cars to try to get back to my buddy's house so I could figure out what I was going to do. About halfway back, I heard a voice say my name. Because I'd lived there so long, most of the officers and the trouble I'd been in, they knew me. So I turned around, I looked, it's a Fairborn cop. I immediately think he's going to give me a charge, and I just sit down on the sidewalk. He walks up and he asks me if he can talk to me. I said, "Man, I'm not trying to catch a charge." He said, "I'm not going to give you a charge. Can you stand up?" And I said, "No." "If I help you up, can you stand?" And I said, "I think so." So he helped me stand up, put me against his car, and I stood there. And he talked to me a minute. He said, "I heard what you told the paramedics and what you're trying to do," because I told them that something had to change. I wasn't going to make it. And he said, "They wouldn't take you, but I'm going to." So he took me to Soin Medical Center. They kept me about 7 hours, and that whole time I was so alcohol soaked that they couldn't get any blood. They just couldn't do it. But something in me changed, and I told them, "Don't let me out of here. I need to go somewhere." And I started crying. And I said, "Ma'am, I don't know what to do, but if you let me out of here, I'll die." Well, they were able to get me into Kettering Behavioral, which is an affiliated rehabilitation clinic. They sent me there. They kept me 5 days, and they informed me that on the 6th day, they were going to have to release me because of insurance. I said, "Please don't let me out. I want to look into inpatient treatment because I had never been to any in my life. I want to look into that. Don't let me out. I won't make it." And I started crying again. Well, she says, "I don't know." And they looked that evening. They couldn't find anything. The next day, I'm thinking, well, they're going to kick me out because it's day 6. They didn't say anything. They kept me for 2 more days. And they found Woodhaven. The staff of Kettering Behavioral covered my bill for 2 days. So I wouldn't have to be put out. And that evening, as I was getting ready to leave Kettering Behavioral to go to Woodhaven. I thought, you know what? I'm afraid I'm going to get in that door and I'm going to freak out and I'm going to bust through and run. By the glory of God, I walked in that door, and the only thought that hit my mind, the only thought that hit my mind is, this is it. It's time. Through some personal evaluation and a lot of others' personal experiences and treatment classes about alcoholism, I've learned a lot through Woodhaven of the root of the cause really was. Alcohol is just a side effect. The real problem lied within me, my way of thinking. Started gaining a little strength. By the second week in Woodhaven, I had a few guys that had been there. The program varied anywhere from 60 or 70 days to 110, depending on whatever. By the second week in there, I'm bouncing around, I'm learning, I'm happy, and I'm feeling better. And people are asking me, why are you smiling? And I just tell them, you don't get it. This saved my life. Well, I only remained at Woodhaven for 70 days through residential and PHP. And in about the last 3 weeks or so, I decided I was going to try sober living. I knew nothing about it. I'd heard of the word, but that was it. And they had an event there at Woodhaven in the lobby where all the Good Shepherd and a few others showed up to let you preview their literature and talk to you a little bit about their facilities and their programs. And I seen Good Shepherd. And I thought, I'm interested. The religious aspect of it, I ain't gonna lie, kind of freaked me out a little bit. Spiritually, that's a difference to me. I didn't know whether it was like a church every day kind of thing or whatever, but I'm willing to adjust. I'm changing. So I applied, and it was right down to about the 5 days before I was to get out. I talked to the director, Sean, and he said, I got a bed for you. Because I begged Woodhaven not to let me out. Since I've arrived at Woodhaven, left there with a little spiritual enlightenment, and came to Good Shepherd, the changes and the promises that have come to me are amazing. The being held accountable, the structure, with just enough to learn and grow. It's hard to find a word for that. It's a miracle. Family coming back into my life. Friends, one-sided friendships, which I can repair, because I sure wasn't a friend. We owned a thrift store here in Dayton, and we were out doing helping a guy move some furniture. We also do that. And Gary, the gentleman that runs our thrift store, called us, and he says, you guys have to stop at the shop. Well, I was tired that day, and it's about 2:30 in the afternoon and a little irritated, and I'm like, doggone it, we're not going to get back till 6 o'clock tonight. He said, well, you got to stop. So we left the job site, this guy's house. We were bringing a load. It just happened to be we'd come right through here, right past the store to go to the other location he was moving to. So on the way through, we stopped. We walk into the store. We come in the back door. And Gary's standing there looking straight at me, and he keeps doing this. Points at me. He says, I got something for you, and he keeps doing this. So I kind of walked through and walked down the steps toward him. I was, "You okay?" And he said, like this, "I got something for you." "Gary?" And then he looked. Well, I turned and looked. And there stood my daughter that I hadn't seen in almost 3 years. She'd seen on Facebook what I was doing and came to find me. Those miracles do exist. From this point on, the only way out is up. In the last few months, I've been able to sponsor others, been involved in a lot of service work. Things as a true blown in my drinking days I wouldn't have even offered. But that's where I'm at, and I appreciate your time.